When members of five notorious motorcycle gangs encountered a lone boy in a coffee shop on the street, they thought they had an easy target. But they found an ex-Army Ranger who would not only change their lives, but also change the dynamics of their lives. The events of that evening would inspire a unity movement that would be viewed millions of times online, and they would see that the toughest battles often take place in the places we least expect. Elijah Carter sat at his usual table by the window of the Mayfield Cafe. He took a sip of his soda, adjusted his hood, and listened to the light conversations around him. In contrast to the chaos of the outside world, it was always peaceful here. At 16, he appeared ordinary. His slight frame and unassuming demeanor belied the years of rigorous training he had received in the youth unit of the Army Cadet program. But the small silver badge on his jacket was the only visible sign of his accomplishments. "There you go," said the elderly coffee shop owner, Mrs. Haiti, as she placed a hot plate of French fries on the table. Elijah had known this woman since he was a child. She had always admired his quiet dedication to the local community center. "How's that tutoring program going?" Mrs. Haiti asked. "Very well. I've started taking care of 2 new kids," Elijah replied with a slight smile. Mrs. Haiti nodded with satisfaction. "It's nice to see you're focused. You're doing a good job, honey. This town will benefit from you keeping those kids on the right track." At that moment, the doorbell rang. The atmosphere in the cafe changed instantly. 5 men wearing black leather jackets entered. They were members of a notorious motorcycle gang called the Red Vultures. Their leader was a large man with a deep-cut scar on his cheek. He spoke in a mocking tone, his eyes darting around in disdain. "Wow, wow, look at this little place," he said with a grin. "Guys, it looks like we've found ourselves a friendly place." Elijah turned his eyes to the reflection in the window. He studied the scene calmly. The leader was over 6 feet tall, muscular like a linebacker. His heavy boots echoed on the wooden floor. He turned to a waiter, smiling wryly and knocking the tray in his hand. Glasses fell to the floor and shattered. The high school waitress tried to pick up the shards, her hands shaking. A nearby woman, with her 2 small children, quietly got up and started to leave, but the leader quickly turned around. "Where are you going?" he shouted, standing in front of her. He leaned in close to her face. "Perhaps you could keep her company?" There was a deep silence in the cafe. No one moved. The leader turned slowly and noticed Elijah sitting at the corner table. His eyes narrowed. "What is this? Are you playing hero?" he asked mockingly. Elijah turned his gaze calmly to him. "Is there a problem?" the leader asked, taking a threatening step. Elijah rose calmly to his feet. "I've actually learned a few things about problems," he said. "One of them is knowing when to back off." The leader laughed, but there was a vague gleam in his eyes. "Do you expect us to take you seriously?" "You don't have to take me seriously," Elijah said, "but you need to let these people go now." The biker with the skull tattoo standing next to the leader lunged at Elijah's arm. His move was hasty. Elijah coolly took a step aside and redirected the man's momentum, sending him crashing onto the table. As the plates clattered to the floor, Elijah leaned down and swept the man's legs away. The big man fell to the ground with a thud. "You're going to regret this," the leader growled, blood seeping from his lips. Elijah smiled slightly. "Probably." The leader was furious as the other motorcyclists surrounded Elijah. The first man attacked. Elijah quickly parried his blow and punched him hard. The second man tried to grab him from behind, but Elijah ducked and elbowed him sharply in the stomach. The third hesitated and backed away from the door. He glanced at his comrades before quickly dashing out. Elijah locked eyes with the leader. "Are you going to continue this now, or are you ready to leave?" The leader clenched his teeth, but when he realized that everyone's eyes were on him, he made a decision. After a few seconds of silence, he turned his head and said to his men, "We're leaving." The leader and his gang members accepted their defeat and headed out the door. The cafe fell silent as they watched them drive away. Miss Haiti looked at Elijah gratefully. Elijah placed his silver badge inside his jacket and took another sip of his soda. At that moment, he realized that the cafe was indeed a rest stop. But sometimes some breaks would bring an unexpected struggle. The leader struggled to his feet, The pain and anger on his face showed the seriousness of the situation. "You'll pay for this, boy. No one messes with the Griffin Vultures," he growled. Elijah replied calmly but firmly, "No one messes with me either." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The bikers exchanged nervous glances. The leader stumbled toward the door and muttered, "We'll be back." Elijah called after her, "Not unless you know what's good for you." The first patrol car was pulling into the parking lot when Mrs. Haiti emerged from the kitchen, rolling pin in hand. The bikers limped out. Elijah turned to the mother and her children, who were now huddled in a corner. "It's okay," he said softly. "They won't bother you again." By the time the police had taken statements and cleared the scene, Elijah had returned to his cabin and quietly finished his soda. Mrs. Haiti sat across from him. Her expression was a mixture of concern and pride. "You didn't have to do this, you know," she said. Elijah replied simply, "Someone had to." What neither of them knew was that a cafe customer had recorded the entire encounter and posted it online. By the next morning, the video had gone viral, garnering hundreds of thousands of views. The headlines were hailing Elijah as a local hero. His quiet life was about to be turned upside down. The video hadn't just caught attention. Veterans groups, community leaders, and even local motorcycle clubs had reached out, inspired by Elijah's bravery. Within days, the community center where Elijah volunteered was inundated with messages of support. A few days later, the leader of the Griffin Vultures arrived at the community center with his arm in a sling. "We need to talk," he said in a low voice. Elijah nodded and led him into a quiet room. Over the next hour, the man named Travis shared his story. He had served in the military years before, but had struggled to adjust to civilian life. The gang had given him a sense of belonging, but now he was questioning everything. "I don't want this life for my son," he confessed. Elijah looked at the crumpled photo of Travis's son and said, "Let's change it." With Elijah's help, Travis and several other gang members began volunteering at the community center. They started with small jobs but quickly took on larger tasks. They mentored at-risk youth and fixed bikes for local families. Word spread, and soon other motorcycle clubs joined in. The community center became a center of transformation. Over the next few months, the town saw remarkable change. The Griffin Vulture gang disbanded and was replaced by a new group focused on service and mentoring. Elijah worked tirelessly to organize programs that brought people together. It included everything from bike repair shops to neighborhood cleanups. The video of the incident at the coffee shop became a symbol of what one person can achieve by standing tall. By the end of the year, the community had changed completely. The once quiet coffee shop on the edge of town had become a gathering place for people from all walks of life. Although he was still a teenager, Elijah had become a leader and a symbol of hope for his town. One evening, as he looked out over the busy coffee shop, he realized that what had begun with one stance was only the beginning of something much bigger.